ICS STEM Conference presents High Tech Sunday. On today's episode of High Tech Sunday, our hosts, Dr. Mark Vaughn and Lango Dean, sit down with DJ, owner of Tech3 Productions, and head of diversity and inclusion for Aerotech, Donnell Campbell, aka DJ Smooth. Up first is Corning Incorporated's manager of technical talent pipelining, Dr. Mark Vaughn. Next is Career Communication Group's senior technology editor, Lango Dean. Finally, our esteemed guest, Donnell Campbell. Growing up in Detroit in the 80s and 90s, he was surrounded by the ever-growing popularity of hip-hop. During this time, his passion for diversity and inclusion began to grow due to his diverse living environment. This combination of experiences has cultivated into him becoming the hip-hop D&I guy. Campbell has been a DJ for 24 years and received the stage name DJ Smooth early on due to his ability to blend music. Using his performance experience, Campbell has been able to build a special company where everyone is accepted, valued, equal, and therefore inspired and empowered to be a positive change agent throughout our communities. And, without further delay, High Tech Sunday, featuring Dr. Mark Vaughn and Lango Dean.
Thank you so much, Brandon. And since it's still January, I can say Happy New Year to you and to everyone, and certainly to our guest today, Mr. Donnell Campbell. How are you, Mr. Campbell?
Dr. Vaughn, I'm great. Thanks for asking. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. I'm really excited about our conversation today. We've had the great fortune of carving out time every Sunday now for about 6-7 months for High Tech Sunday, but this is a first. I have never had the opportunity to speak with an entertainer, an entrepreneur, a D&I leader, and so this is gonna be fun. And just hearing the intro by Brandon and DJ Smooth, you know we've got to talk about how all of that came together. But before I get ahead of myself, we really like to have the opportunity to learn more about the journey that our guests have been on. And so we start out with I guess a provocative question, and that is, how would you respond to someone asking you, who is Donnell Campbell? What's your background and how did you get started in this journey? We're going to talk about STEM and DJing, but how did it all begin?
Well, Dr. Vaughn, thanks for the question. I cannot talk about me being me without referencing my beautiful mother, God rest her soul, Lois Campbell. That's who I am. That's who I will always be. And that's where, I do everything every single day to make sure that I am being the man that she raised me up to be. So, I have to start there because that's where it all started from for me. So my background is actually not very complicated, but it is definitely one that I feel like every story has its unique twist to it. But born and raised in the city of Detroit, been here all my life. I'm a lover of everything that is Detroit. And I was definitely, if you know anything about Detroit, about it being Motown, when they talk about Motown, what part that probably gets lost sometimes is just how much of a diverse musical culture you have in this area. So it's not just about Motown, it's also about techno. It's also about Latin music. It's also about everything you could possibly think of, salsa, merengue. Like there's so many different type of music you can hear here and be a part of. And so I've been around music my entire life, born and raised in the church. So, I played drums growing up. So that was maybe the first start for me when you talk about really getting into that space and starting to enjoy music in various different ways and different ways to play it. I was fortunate to be the guy who carried up the crates back in the day. I'd have the record crates and carry them up the stairs with the other DJs who were really the performers. And, I was learning from some of the best that I feel like at the time. There were really just some great gentlemen who knew that it was all about paying it forward. And that came at a time for me where as hip hop and rap started to become more popular, I fell in love with that style of music because it was what I was being raised around and those kind of things. So little bit of mix from the church, but then also, hip hop as well was really what kind of took me to the place where I wanted to be. So I'm a father of four beautiful children. I'm a grandfather of two, which is just as wonderful. It feels good to spoil them from time to time as well. And I'm also a soon-to-be husband for the second time around in October of this year. So many different things, but when you talk about how it started and how we got to this point, it really I can't stress enough of how much it is about being raised in a household with a mother who made sure she stressed to me that a couple of things. One, put God first. Number two, make sure that you represent yourself well. And what I mean by that is it doesn't matter if it's the CEO of a company or someone that is out on their luck on the streets. You need to be able to speak to that person and speak to the person that's at that high level and everybody in between. Anything other than that is not acceptable. And understand that you're never above or below anybody else. You are right there with them because that very well could be you. And I'll kind of close out with this. One of her favorite sayings is count your blessings, name them one by one. And I try to make sure that I live by that creed every single day when I wake up, because I know that it's a blessing to wake up every day. It's not just given.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing a bit of that journey. You won't believe this, but I am a pastor in addition to the work that I do in talent pipelining and being a technical scientist by training myself. But this past Sunday, I sang that song. It's an old hymn or congregational song, Count Your Blessings. And I couldn't let it go, all three verses, because of the fact that early in this year, it is certainly, especially after our experiences of last Wednesday, easy for you to forget how blessed you are. Mm-hmm. And so counting your blessings, I am with you on that one. Daily, we have reason to be thankful. So you mentioned that you were a young musician actually in the church. And so really, really glad for the legacy that you carry from your mother even to this day. But how was your own spirituality? We talk about different levels of spirituality on High Tech Sunday, but how has your spirituality actually informed and influenced your journey, both as an entertainer, as an entrepreneur, and as a D&I leader?
Dr. Vaughn, that's a great question. So for me, everything that I do has to have some ethics behind it. That means something to me. I don't think it's just about making a dollar. Sometimes in this business, people will take any type of opportunity, or as we like to call them, gig, put in front of you. And that's just not who I am. That's not who my company is. Our tagline is perfecting the art of great customer service, but that service comes with making sure that we have the right clientele that we want to work with. I have declined business because it doesn't align with my goals and to that point of just the things that are important to me and my family. I believe that you should be able to stand on whatever work that you do and be able to, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, be able to look back on it and stand proud. And more importantly, for your children to be able to look back on that work and be proud of the work that you've done in that space. So whether that's being a DJ, whether that's being the work that I've done in the D&I space, that's one of the key reasons, or how I, one of my focuses on why I got into the D&I space as well, is not only because I have passion for this space, but ultimately because things are about legacy for me at this point in my life. And my legacy, I would love for it to be one of all the things that my mother taught me to be as a man, but also more, just as important is having my grandchildren being able to say the level of difference that I made in the world and trying to leave it better than what it was before I got here. So that's just where those two paths kind of intersect at for me, because it drives everything I do every single day, day in and day out. And I've always tried to find myself to be an ethical man and make sure that I continue to stay in that spirit in whatever it I do. It doesn't matter if it's DJing or whether it's D&I.
Thank you. So let's jump into the D&D, if you will, the D&I and the DJing. I guess we should first make sure that we unpack for folks when we speak of D&I. Can you define that acronym and then talk to us about your work? What is your primary role in that particular space?
Absolutely. So, what we're really talking about is diversity and inclusion, but really, as we start to expand out in this space, we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's a key component of it as well of the work that we do. In this space, a large part of it is making sure people have a voice. And that's where I like to start with things that, because we can, and I use, various different things that I talk to my team and my leaders about as far as what it means to be these various different things. When we talk about diversity, I always go down the path of diversity is not an option. You don't get to pick whether or not you can be a diverse individual or not, because we can talk about diversity as it looks from your race. It can be about sex, gender, just even diversity of thought. So diversity is always going to be around you no matter what, whether you want it to be or not. There's always going to be a diverse thing, because two people can be raised in the same household, grow up the exact same way, and think two very different ways. So there's always going to be that diversity there. The equity component of it is where I talk about, a lot of times with my folks is that the equity and equality sometimes get mixed up. And I always like to make sure that I am being very clear about those two things, because equality is more about sameness, where equity is about fairness. And so what we want to, continue to drive in this space is making sure that everyone has a fair opportunity to get whatever their long-term goals is. And then lastly, when you think about the inclusion component of it, I use it as, when we talk about DJing and dancing, I say, hey, you can invite people to the party. You're including them by inviting them to the party. But if you want to be inclusive, you're going to invite them to the dance floor with you as well. You're not going to just invite them to the party. You're going to bring them on the dance floor with you as well, because now you're actually making them a part of everything that's going on.
I'm so glad that you actually made that distinction. We've been having, of course, conversations about race and equality and equity over the course of the last several months. But it was before that it was notable and provocative interest. So I appreciate you making the clear distinction between equality and equity. And so when you think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, how is it that you actually go about a typical day at Aerotech leading that effort? What is it that a DE&I leader actually gets involved with?
So the biggest component I would say is that you are looking at enterprise wide as far as the things you get involved with within the organization. So whether that be talent acquisition, whether that be talent development, whether that be anything having to do with how we work with our corporate social responsibilities and how we show up in like the neighborhoods and the areas in the communities of where we reside. A day in a life, I would say that's one of the things I love about it, Dr. Vaughn, is that, there is no 2 days that are the same. That is for sure. I can honestly say that the entire time I've been in this space, I can never say, well, man, Tuesday felt just like Wednesday. Like, no, not at all. It is definitely an ever moving, ever changing mark. So what you're really trying to do is really just be the voice of reason and fairness within any organization that it is. You want to look at the different ways that you go about it. When you talk about like, hey, what's a day in a life look like every single day? It's just understanding the importance of the different companies and making sure people understand how you are uniquely positioned to lead those efforts, and making sure that not only as a person of color, but a person who understands the importance of companies being mindful of the challenging or the changing demographics we have in this country. And, since you're being mindful about those things, it's about the way that, that in which diversity is acknowledged and included in everything that you do and how you kind of present yourself every single day. and ultimately just being an arbiter of fairness for the company. So you're working with a lot of leaders so that they can make sure that they're there for to be able to present their best selves and make sure people can present their best selves to work every single day, and that the way they feel very comfortable in what they do.
Wow. So there's so many headlines that I took away from that information. And so in a nutshell, it sounded like you said that the DE&I leader, especially the way that you approach it, is an arbiter of intentional, mindful fairness across the enterprise. I think that that is really something that we all can agree is critically important for not only the sustainability of any organization, but for you to actually be a leader in the sector that your organization is in. So really pivotally important role that you serve. So really glad that there is someone like you who is able to actually have such impact. So that was the one D. So now I'm going to get into the other D. That is the DJing. I got to ask, how did you get the moniker DJ? But before I go there, when did you first know that you wanted to be a DJ? How did that come about?
I didn't. Honestly, I just wanted to be where the fun was at. I just wanted to be where the party was at. And, me having a love for music the way that I did, I started hanging around a lot of DJs. And like I said, they got to more towards the beginning, it's like, hey, you want to hang around? And since you're here, you might as well carry your crate. Okay, cool. Well, carrying the crate was what got me into the party. And so I didn't have to pay to get into the party. So I thought that was kind of cool. And then, after a while, I realized that, hey, if you're actually the one who is behind the wheels and kind of controlling the party, you get to play what you want to play and how you want to play it. And I was like, oh, okay. Which, by the way, is mistake 101. We'll talk about that later. Mistake 101 of being a DJ. You don't get to just play what you want to play. It doesn't work that way. but that's what I thought at the time. And so how I got into it, though, is that because I started off, like I mentioned, playing the drums, I had a knack for being able to kind of just catch rhythms and catch beats and understand, just the science behind, what it means to be like in an 8-beat rhythm or 16-beat measures, and understanding like how music measures. And I read music as well. So, it made it easier for me to kind of understand how those things went together. I think how I really got into it is that, believe it or not, I started truly testing my skills as a DJ by doing Latin music, salsa, merengue, bachata. That's the first time I really started getting behind the wheels and really starting understanding and getting good at it. And I don't speak a lick of Spanish, so I can put that out there ahead of time, Dr. Vaughn. I'll be the last person to tell you that. But I could catch the beats, and I understood how the beats were. And what I didn't understand at the time, which is definitely giving me how I get to getting to my name and everything, is just the fact that that's a very difficult, that style of music has a little bit of an off beat. So it's on every third beat, which versus every fourth beat, like you hear in typical pop or hip hop songs. The salsa beat falls on every third beat. So being able to blend that music together is definitely a skill, because it's more about making sure it all runs together and sounds like one clean song. So when I said I was hanging around so many other DJs and I saw them doing it, and I really, every time they'd walk away or the end of the night or the beginning of the night, I would be the one over there kind of playing around and seeing if I could do it. And then they would push me to the side and say, okay, you don't know what you're doing, move out the way. And the real DJs would start working. But that's what it is in anything that you do. You start off slow and you start off coming up on things. And so I decided at that point that I wanted to invest back into myself. And as I was working I was a caddy at a Detroit golf club at the time. And I instead of spending my money on clothes, I started to spend my money on records and started spending my money on equipment and trying to figure out how I can be that guy. Cause I thought it was so much fun to, and some of this may sound kind of bad, but I thought it was pretty cool to be able to tell, 100 people in a room to throw your hands up in there, and they throw their hands up in there. I was like, wow, you can tell them move left, and then they move left. It was great.
Okay. So, all righty. So DJ Smooth could put these beats or the different music together smoothly. So I
Yes.
get that. And I thought it was really interesting. You said that you started out getting in the room by serving. I'll carry the crate, and the crates got me in the room. So there's something instructive in that is beyond DJing for sure. But here you are. Motown guy, hip hop guy. So, got to ask you, how is it that you cut your teeth on Latin sounds? How'd that come about?
It's interesting. It rolls into what I do today, and being in this is prior to my start with Aerotech. I worked for a different staffing company, and this was actually down in North Carolina at the time. I lived down in North Carolina for a couple of years, and the majority of the people who actually worked for the staffing company that I was working for at that time, the people that we put to work, were all Latino. A majority of them was like 85% Latino. And one of the gentlemen who we got really cool with, he was just a cool guy. He would invite us out to come watch him DJ. He was one of the local DJs there, but he also worked at the plant that we had him working at as well. And ironically enough, he ended up having a situation where he wasn't he was going to have to he was looking for a place to stay, and at the time we had an extra room at the house, and I said, hey, you can always just crash over here. And he came and he brought all his equipment. So Dr. Vaughn, he had all his equipment set up right there for me to mess around with. So but all the music he had was Latin music. So when you're not bringing anything to the table, you got to deal with what you have and put in front of you, and you work with that. So, but I started to grow a love for that music and an understanding of what it really meant to that culture. And so that's where it all started at for me, is that, I started working with him, and, he started showing me a couple of tricks to the trade. And, one day he literally said, hey, I got to run to the bathroom. And he didn't come back for an hour. Cause he said, hey, just play a couple songs for me. And, he kind of set me up, Dr. Vaughn. I wasn't really appreciative of that, but that was his way of throwing me into the fire, because I didn't think I was ready yet. And he was just like, hey, I'm gonna go to the bathroom real quick. And he literally left me up there for an hour on playing music that I wasn't knowing, but it worked out.
So clearly he saw something in you that allowed him to put his own reputation on the line and leave you up there. So think about this. When you are Donnell Campbell versus DJ Smooth, what's the difference? Or are they one and the same?
If you would have asked me this question 20 years ago, I would have said they are two different people. But now they're one and the same. And I think that's just an evolution of who I've become as a man. I would say before I wasn't maybe as comfortable people knowing me as DJ Smooth if in the work environment, because I just didn't, I was like, oh, I don't know how people would feel about that or how they would react to that. He's a DJ. What does that mean? There might be some negative connotation to it. Does that mean he hangs out all night? Maybe he doesn't work as hard, those kind of things. So I created all these narratives in my head of what I thought it might be if I was to go down the path of people even knowing that I DJ. And then ironically enough, it was an event like some of the STEM events that, we brought over, that be Bay of Women of Color, that's probably the first time my counterparts even found out. And at that time, I think I'd been working for the company for 12 years, maybe, or 12 or 13 years. And that was the first time they ever even knew that I DJ. And they were like, wait a minute, what are you doing? I didn't realize you did that. So today they're one and the same, because I'm very proud of both of them. I'm very proud of, who DJ Smooth is. I'm very proud of who Donnell Campbell is. And, there's no reason for one to be in the spotlight or be the shadow of one of the other. So they're one and the same.
Very cool. And so I think that it is interesting, the evolution that you just mentioned over the course of the 20 years or so that this all happened, that the one and the same actually became embraced. So we don't necessarily think of STEM when we think about DJing, unless you actually realize that there are some pretty sophisticated kinds of equipment that DJs use. So, can you talk to us a little bit about the technical side of DJing and that whole intersection between music and science and technology?
Absolutely. We've come such a long way in this space from, I mentioned earlier about carrying, crates of records and using that as the way that we got sound out to people. And, when we did that, there was a level of connection that you have to make. So one of the things you talked about when I first started DJing, what that looked like for me. So from a STEM side of things, you had to know where everything went. So whether that was being, hey, how does the input and outputs work? Where do you have to run different channels to? Knowing about ohms, which is the amount of music that comes out, and then how much wattage of each different speaker comes out. Those things were extremely important, and they will still remain important to this day, because if you push too much wattage out to a speaker that is not able to hold that much wattage, that's when you hear the terminology of, hey, that person blew their speaker. Well, they blew it because they tried to push too much power out. And the way that it works is that truly your mixing board is what drives how much power is actually getting pushed to each one of those speakers as they go out. And when that power goes out, if you're not cautious of what that ratio needs to be, and now that you say it that way, doing some very quick math on what that needs to look like, you can wind up making a very expensive mistake, because the mixer that you're pushing out with only knows to just push. That's its job, is to push electricity and push voltage out to that particular speaker. So it doesn't know when it's too much. Only you know by the reactors that are on there. Now there's mechanisms in place where they have things where actually will shut it off if it gets too hard, or the speaker itself will actually just kind of calm down for a minute, then it'll end up picking back up. But and they even have ways you can look at the waveforms to understand like what portions of the song will actually be higher or lower than the others. Now, again, back in the day when I first started, those things weren't around, so you just had to have an ear for it, and you had to be, make sure that you weren't pushing things too far. And trust me, if you ever push things too far, all you have to do is one time. You only need to do it one time, and you realize you won't make that mistake again, and you realize how expensive that mistake is. But and on top of that, the only other thing I would probably say to wrap it up would just be the amount of technology that goes into building what are now the turntables of today. There is so much engineering that is involved in how quickly the response time is, how things are wired to, whether that be making a song repeat, making it make double beats, putting effects on it. All those kind of things are ran through the circuit boards, and those boards are then programmed. And so what a lot of folks don't see is there's a lot of programming that DJs do before they even turn on the first record. There's a lot of things we put in place to make sure that it's actually set up the right way and structured the right way to where we can have the sound hit the way we want it to hit when we want that particular song to play.
I'm telling you. So now we know how this fits into High Tech Sunday, because that was a high tech explanation that we usually think of. Some folks, we think of DJ, you show up, you push a button and play a song. And you just really ended that mythology for all of us who were so uninformed. You mentioned something a few minutes ago about the power that the DJ can have over a crowd, so that when you say throw your hands in the air and you see 300 people do it, it really is influential in a sense. And so when you think about the fact that it is a relational kind of job that you have, can you speak to how it is that you are able to draw upon the kinds of connection that you make with your audiences as DJ Smooth, and the kind of connection you have to make with people in order for them to get on the same page with you as a DE&I leader?
Dr. Vaughn, great question. I think it actually starts with, I'll start it with the music, right? So regardless of what genre of music you're talking about, it doesn't matter if you're talking about hip hop, you're talking about country, you're talking about rock. There's certain things, the beats to the measure and all those kind of things don't change. Like that's ever consistent. So regardless of whatever kind of music that you're playing, you can literally blend two different types of genre of music together, and still come up with a beautiful sound. Sometimes sometimes you think about like, hey, why in the world would you play, a Willie Nelson song with Run DMC? Well, guess what? Those two crowds are probably not usually in the same place a lot of times. But as a DJ, you can bring those two places together. And so for me, blending music is just as simple as it is when you transfer that over into the D&I space. It's the same thing when you talk about blending people together. People are people. And sometimes we like to think now they're different in the way that, their style and things of that nature, but at its core, very similar to how we talked about, like how many beats are in a measure. It's the same. People are still just people when it's all said and done. And I think once you can get people to understand that you can coexist and you can blend together and make a beautiful sound together, and really actually attract everybody versus only attracting one genre. So that's where it kind of comes at for me.
Wow, I really, really enjoyed that thread that you just drew for us, because I think all of us have had the occasion when we've said, wow, let's say that party, that event, that it was kind of dry. And you point to the DJ as having been perhaps the thing or the person that influenced the dryness. And then you could have been at an event that was dry until the DJ kind of got things exciting and really lit up, if you will. And I think that applies in the D&I space as well. And so that's the thread that you kind of just drew for us. So I'm going to ask you one more question maybe before we shift to the next segment. When you are looking at the technology once again, and you think about the reality that we have experienced over the course of the last year, let's say, where gatherings have been at some points non-existent, to them being a lot smaller than they might otherwise be due to the pandemic. How is it that you are able to continue to have the impact on the entertainer side when the way that we kind of connect and show up has gotten a lot different, necessarily so, in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, Dr. Vaughn, I would say that connections are things that need to be genuine, right? And I think that if you waited until now to start, being that person that connected with people, then you probably would be behind. But I think that what has worked for me and what I've seen has worked with a lot of other DJs is that most of us have connections that we already had in place, or followings, or whatever you want to call it, that we've already had in place prior to COVID actually coming about. And those followings come from people just enjoying what you do. They think you do a very good job at it, and they want to, continue to hear it. And in times like that we're in right now, there a lot of times it's things like that are what uplifts people. I think of, one of the most common ones that you hear about it is D Nice right now, where he's on Instagram, and he just wanted to create a place where people could just stop and get away from everything that they're seeing that's going on in the world right now. And if you really think about it, that's most of the time when people go see DJs. When they want to go hang out, those kind of things, it's their time to get away. And so we've been blessed with a gift. And I do believe that it's definitely a gift. In order for you to be a DJ, it's not as simple as just pushing some buttons and doing those things. So you've been given with a gift. And I'm under the impression that, if God gives you a gift and you decide not to use it, then shame on you, because he can very quickly take it away from you. And so if you're not appreciative of the things that God has given you and you don't use that to the best of your ability, then, that's something that you will have to answer for later. And so, again, referencing back to my mom, she was very big on, make sure you make the best out of every situation that you put yourself, that you find yourself into, because you just don't know when your last days may be. So you might as well, go big or go home type of deal.
Absolutely. And so use it or lose it is what I took what I took away from that. Again, I'm a headlines kind of guy. So I heard you say from your mom, keep God first, represent yourself well, and along the way, another truth that you embrace is diversity is not an option. And now you're saying that if you've got the gift, if God has invested in you, you've got to make sure that the return on that investment is high. And I think a big clarifier is that you don't just necessarily DJ in a room full of hundreds of people, that the gift of DJing can be across technology and still provide an escape for people from the challenges of the real challenges of the world that we are finding ourselves in today. So I'm going to hand things off to Lango Dean, my co-host, and I'll be back in a little bit. But for now, hey, Lango, how you doing?
I'm very well, Dr. Vaughn. How about you?
I'm doing great, thank you. I'm enjoying this conversation with DJ Smooth.
I can tell. And he is so smooth, really, in his delivery, isn't he?
Absolutely, absolutely.
You're listening to High Tech Sunday, featuring Dr. Mark Vaughn, Lango Dean, and our special guest, DJ, owner of Tech3 Productions and head of diversity and inclusion for Aerotech, Donnell Campbell, aka DJ Smooth. This week's episode is brought to you by the BEA STEM Conference. Now, a word from our sponsor.
I will be the last to fall.
BEA. It's the moment in your eyes when the future becomes clear. The opportunities ahead, the visions, and the dreams.
I will be the last to fall.
The hope of what's in reach. Imagine the possibilities. It's the essence of science, of technology, a world of careers unleashed. Everything you need to bring out the best in your career, you can get at BEA. BEA, becoming everything you are.
Again, this week's episode is brought to you by the BEA STEM Conference. Now, back to the show.
Welcome, DJ Smooth, aka Mr. Donnell Campbell. As you know, Aerotech is a great recruiter at the Black Engineer of the Year Awards Science, Technology, Engineering, Math STEM Conference. They really support diversity. They're hiring managers, they're corporate recruiters, they're talent advisors, the people who speak seminars and award shows. So my question is, how should a younger audience that is thinking of coming to BEA think about DJing as a career versus as a hobby?
Lego, great question. I think that and I would say this whether we're talking about DJing or anything else. I think a large part of whatever it is that you do or where you decide to take your life or your career really needs to be built into, your passions. Like follow your passions in life. Because I can't remember who it was that said it, but it was like, hey, find something that you're good at and then get great at it and then find a way to make money by doing it. And so for me, if anybody would, to answer your question around like, hey, you're turning from a career to a hobby, DJing was never a hobby for me because I knew from the first time I saw somebody do that and realized that I learned that I could do it, that I wanted to do it no matter what. Right. And so I guess technically you could say that was, looked at as a hobby, but I also realized that there was a way for me to be able to build out my own career from that as well, because I thought that it was going to be something that if you would have asked me my younger self, if I would have been a DJ or a DE&I executive, that I would have told you I would have been a DJ. I just followed the path that was put in front of me. And that's what the same advice I would give to any younger audience as well, is that there are paths put in front of you for a reason. Investigate those paths and then figure out which one is best for you. But, I don't think you should ever go down the path of just settling for anything to be a hobby if you can be great at it.
Great. So if you're a young person today and you're interested in becoming a DJ, what are the first steps you should take? I know one of the steps that you said, one of the biggest mistakes that you talked about was that don't ever think that you can play whatever you want. That is a number one no-no. But
Yes.
What are the things that you should do if you want to become a DJ and a good DJ at that?
I think number one, just like anything else in life that you're going after, you need to study your craft. This is something that you say you want to go after. Don't just get caught up into the DJs that you might see like in your neighborhood or just people that you see that are out on, social media right now. Like, do your homework. Go back and realize this, where this whole thing started from and why this was put into place and why people actually started to have, the disc jockeys come out and actually be the ones who kind of, move the crowd. And so that would be the first thing I would tell somebody to do. Number two, I would tell them is to make sure that you understand that this is an investment. These are the kind of things that just like a lot of things in life, you're not going to see instant success. You're going to make a lot of mistakes on the front end, and it's not going to sound great on the front end. But you have to practice, and that's the other component of it too. Practice, 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 and then when you get tired, get up and practice some more. And then when you get tired again, practice some more. I literally, I talked a little bit to Dr. Vaughn about my first time, playing in front of a big crowd, and how the DJ just left me up there. But what I failed to mention was that I probably at that time had probably put a solid 120 to 125 hours behind just learning how to blend music at the house. So just doing it on my own. So I put in the time to be able to do that out in front of a crowd. And so I earned that right to be able to do it in front of a crowd. So those would be the things I would definitely do. And then also to your point, as you mentioned, realize that it's not about you. The best DJs realize that they are there to actually read the crowd, move the crowd, and make the crowd happy. What you like is irrelevant because it's about what crowd you're in front of at that particular time.
Wonderful. So DJing is a craft, and what you need to do most of all, like learning to be a pianist or learning to be a guitarist or whatever, you have to practice, 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 and then practice some more. In the conversation with Dr. Vaughn, you talked about the sophistication of much of the technical equipment that you use now. You talked about inputs and outputs. You talked about how much wattage comes out of a speaker. You talked about mixing boards, the mechanisms involved in that. And, you talked about the engineering involved in the circuit boards, the programming that DJs need to do. But what would you tell young people now in terms of courses that they can take to become good DJs?
Thank you. That's a great question as well. So I think if you want to be some of the best DJs can literally pull from music that you have never heard of. And where I would say is that if a course that would be a good take that I would say would be good to take is just the history of music, the theories behind music, understanding where those things come from. Because when you do that, you get to learn about all genres of music. What you don't want to do is pigeonhole yourself and be stuck into this category where you can only play one style and be one type of DJ. There's nothing wrong that if there's something that you are an expert in, it's your expertise. But if that's the only thing that you can do, you're limiting yourself as far as what you can do. So some of those courses I would say was definitely take a music course, and specifically a course around the history behind music. Learn about classical music, learn about jazz, learn about country, learn about folk music, learn about all these different things, because that's only thing that's going to do is help you when you're in the midst of doing a party, because then you can pull from different kinds of places in order for you to be able to kind of make the party the way that you would like for it to see, you want to see it go.
That's really interesting. I wouldn't have thought, because even with musicians, when they're training, it's, I mean, the people who coach them always encourage them to expose themselves to different kinds of music, classical music, like you talked about, jazz, country, hip hop, merengue, salsa, whatever. So, what are the best practices would you encourage young people to pay attention to so that they can become successful in their art? Because it is an art to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a craft, but it is an art to some extent.
So I think what I would encourage folks to do is never be afraid to invest into yourself. And again, I can't stress that enough. You're not going to, if you don't put in the work and the time. We talked about practicing earlier. Well, guess what? You need some equipment to practice on. And so that starts with you actually sacrificing some things in order to get the type of equipment that you want to get. I would tell them, don't go out and get the latest and greatest and the thing with the shiny label on it and everything. And get, you see a DJ that's been doing this for 30 years, and you're like, oh, well, he bought a $3,000 piece worth of equipment. I have to have a $3,000 worth of equipment. Well, guess what? He worked really hard to get to that point where he could get that type of equipment. But I guarantee you that same guy could probably play just as good on the $200 piece of equipment. So it's about putting your training wheels on before anything else. You don't just hop on a bike and start riding. You usually start with some training wheels a little bit. And so I would tell them that you definitely make sure you invest into yourself, get the training wheels on first. And then as you actually start to play for more crowds, and then as you start to make money, without a shadow of a doubt, no matter how much I don't care if when you first start playing, if you're only making $100 every single time you play, you have to take a portion of that money and invest it back into your craft, whether that be buying music, buying equipment, whatever that looks like, because that's how you're going to grow and get better.
That's wonderful. There's always talk about the hidden rules in corporate America. And I think there are hidden rules in any organization, doesn't matter where. So you always find yourself, you don't know what you don't know. Mm-hmm. So what are those hidden rules in DJing that you think that young people should know about?
So I like to make sure I remind myself that that we are on a family friendly show. So I'm going to make sure that I put it in a way that I feel like everybody can digest. Just because someone thinks that they bring you something for you to either drink or food, whatever, because they want to say they're appreciative of you, doesn't mean that they have your best intentions in mind. So sometimes as a DJ, a lot of people want to kind of thank you or, get you to play their stuff by whether that be tipping you. Now, I'll take the tips, do that, take the money all the time. But when it comes to things like, anybody trying to buy you a drink like that, like if you don't know those people, you don't accept it. That's one thing. Number two, you are there to be the entertainment, and that's what your job is, to keep the party going. It is not your job to be a part of the party. You are to be the person who's orchestrating the party. So if you find yourself actually out there, dancing and playing with people more than you are DJing, then you're probably not doing that well. You can have fun with it. You need to enjoy yourself, those kind of things. And then lastly, which actually should be number one, and kind of going back to one of the questions you asked before about courses you should take, make sure you become very comfortable in public speaking. Public speaking courses can take you a very long way when it comes to becoming a DJ and being really good at it, because then that helps you, as they say, in the words of Rakim, MC means move the crowd. Well, it also means master of ceremony. And so you have to be able to be that person who's able to tell the crowd when they need to settle down, when it's time for them to have a great time, because every time you DJ may not be a bar or a club. It may be a wedding. It may be a corporate party. It may be some announcements that you have to make. So, get your vernacular together. Make sure that you can speak to every type of crowd that's out there and speak with some clarity, and make sure that you don't make it about yourself.
That's great. This is my last question before I turn it back to Dr. Vaughn. You have been a success on so many levels in the music scene, local, national, international. To a great extent, I think. And you're also a success within corporate America in the diversity and inclusion community. So, what are the keys to your success? What tips would you give people who look to someone like you and say, I want to be like that one day? What tips would you give them, and what are the keys to your success?
Wow. Lego, when you talk about, one, thank you for that, because I think sometimes as you go along, and this is probably one of my keys to success, is that I think you have to be humble. So when somebody tells you, oh, you've been successful, for me, I don't look at it that way all the time, because I'm too busy trying to be humble about it and just making sure that I'm doing the things I'm supposed to do, because it's what, in my mind, is what I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, not that I'm doing anything special than anybody else is. So one, be humble, but then also at the same time recognize the value that you bring. And that's been one of the things that has helped me be successful as well, is that I've had some great mentors, and that's the other thing, get a mentor. And when I say get a mentor, I don't mean just a mentor about your job. You should need a mentor for every stage in your life. I have, like I mentioned, I'm getting married this year. I have someone who's my marriage mentor. I have someone who's my personal mentor. I have someone who's my business mentor. And those folks have played a large part into me being the man that I am today, because without them, I probably would have made some decisions that probably wouldn't have been within my best interest. So I think looking for, seeking out mentorship, being humble, and making sure that you deliver on your promises. That would probably be the last thing I would say as well, is that you have to, if you make a commitment and you say you're going to be somewhere, you be there. If you say you're going to do something, you do it. That's how you gain respect. That's how people view you as someone that they can count on. And that's how people say that, hey, I can trust this person to running my organization when it comes to leading in these efforts, because I know this person has shown a history of doing that.
Thank you. Trust is so very important. Keeping it real, keep humble, or staying humble. And January is mentoring month, so I'm so pleased that you emphasize the importance of having so many different kinds of mentors, business mentors, personal mentors, professional mentors. It doesn't matter what. Always have somebody who you can turn to and ask for good advice. So thank you so much. It's been really great talking to you. I'm going to turn it back now to Dr. Vaughn. Dr. Vaughn?
Thanks so much, Lango. And again, Mr. Campbell, really learning so much from your journey and the insights that you've gained as we were listening to you and Lango, and how you responded to that question about the keys to success. Those keys will open doors to just about any field, any career. And so it's even more clear how it is that your DJ life, if you will, informs your DE&I life and vice versa. So how it all comes together as Donnell and DJ Smooth being one and the same. So we got a few minutes left, and as we mentioned before the show, want to have a little fun with you with kind of a lightning round.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask you a few questions, and I'm sure there are going to be responses that come top of mind. So here we go.
Okay.
What's your favorite genre of music to play?
Hip hop.
What's your favorite? Who's your favorite artist to play?
Jay-Z.
How about your favorite song?
These Three Words by Stevie Wonder.
Wow. Okay. So let's flip it a little bit. What's your least favorite genre?
It would have to be heavy metal.
Okay. Best gig you've ever played for?
Best gig I've ever played for would have to be my niece's wedding. I mean, can't get much better than that.
Wow. No pressure there. How about your worst gig?
Probably my first gig.
Understand that. So how about your favorite DJ moment so far?
My favorite DJ moment really comes from a place of my son, who unfortunately is no longer with us, he came to me when he was 16. He passed away when he was 16. But right before he passed away, he went with me on a gig, and it was about an hour away. And I just remember the drive back, and we came back, and he was like, "Dad, I didn't realize you were that good. You were actually pretty good." And that was, to me, like, just because he was there, and to get anyone that has children knows that, to sneak a praise out of a teenager is almost impossible. So for that had to by far probably be my favorite moment.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing that. And so how about this question? If you could have a conversation with any artist, either present or past, so living or passed on, who would you pick and why?
Oh, that's easy. That would be Prince, or the artist formerly known as.
And why?
I am marveled and astounded by that man's musical genius. The fact that he could play any instrument, the fact that he could, it kind of relates to what we talked about being a DJ. I don't care if you're a country lover or anything like that. Everybody loves a Prince song. You'd be hard pressed to find someone who says, "I can't think of a Prince song that I actually like." And I think more importantly than his music was the way that he went about the work of teaching artists that you don't have to be under a label in order for you to be successful. He showed many artists the way of how to become entrepreneurs. If you ever read the book about Jay-Z, Jay-Z mentioned the fact that he literally took the blueprint from Prince on how to become an independent artist. And we see what Jay-Z has become today. So for me, it would have to be Prince, because I mean, he just paved the way for so many people that don't even realize it.
That's really cool. And I think the history there, again, is just so compelling. So we want to give you the last word, but before we do that, is there a way that our listeners can follow you? Do you have a website or Twitter, Instagram? How can folks, especially DJ Smooth, I'm sure, how can people stay connected to you?
The website is for the company I run is Tech3 Productions. So it's tech3productions.com. That would be, the best way to kind of get in contact with me for anything like that. But from a social media standpoint, you can follow me on Detroit's DJ Smooth. So that's on Instagram, Detroit's DJ Smooth, and as well as DJ Smooth, Detroit's DJ Smooth on Facebook as well. So that's how you get me. I'm not hard to find, and just follow me on CCG as well. I'm always hanging out with those guys as well. It's a great place, great company to work with. So.
I agree with you on that one. So leave us with a closing thought. What would you say to us? It's the beginning of a new year. What is a word of encouragement or inspiration or even challenge that you could leave us with as we wrap up?
I think I will probably end where I started. I started talking about my mom, so I'm going to reference back to a statement she always made to me, and it's something that I live by. If you want something bad enough, you'll find a way, and if you don't, you'll find an excuse.
That is what we would say, I guess, in the GJ world, drop the mic. Mr. Donnell Campbell, DJ Smooth, we have really enjoyed spending time with you today. So on behalf of myself, Lango Dean, and the folks at CCG who allow us to have the opportunity for these high-tech Sunday conversations, thank you so much, and all the best to you in this new year.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
We're going to hand things back to Brandon Newby to see us out.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of High Tech Sunday. Career Communication Group's High Tech Sunday looks at professional development and technology through the lens of spiritual philosophies. In a time when digital information is more critical than ever, this weekly program is produced by and for CCG's community of alumni and professionals in science, technology, engineering, and math fields. The community runs from national thought leaders to aspiring students, and this weekly series aims to bring a concentrated discussion around technological advancements and achievements based on universal moral principles. The 1-hour podcast will be streamed every Sunday. The podcast can be accessed through the BEA Facebook page, Women of Color Facebook page, and CCG YouTube page, in addition to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Podbean, and Spotify. Please join us next time.